In the previous example, we have looked at how to call a method that is there on the child from the parent component. And we have seen an example where if I add any text here, upon clicking on add, it is getting updated in this list of items that we have. And towards the end, we have talked about what if the child wants to call a method on the parent component. So let's quickly look at an hands-on experience that we can do regarding this point. Here is the wireframe that we need to build. Yes, this is the same wireframe that we have used earlier for one of our hands-on experience, where upon entering some text, clicking on the send button, the child was firing an event and sending an event to the parent. Parent, upon listening to that event, has executed and updated the message that is coming from the child on the parent component. So this is what we have seen. In addition to that, I want to execute a method that is there in parent. So I have a method called, let's say I'll call it as method 1 that is there on the parent. I want this method to be called from the child. How do we do that? Earlier we have seen how do we do that from the parent to the child. If there is a method that is there on the child, we were executing it from the parent. How do we do the reverse is what we look at. I have given you a hint in terms of how do we execute it in the previous section. Feel free to give it a try. And in case if you are stuck somewhere and you want some more assistance, feel free to follow along so that way we can build that together. So just to give you a review of the component that we have built, if I enter some text here, hello SFDC, and click on send message, it is getting updated. Similarly, we have a toast message that we are getting. Now I'll be using the same component. I'll add some more text here so that way I can execute a method that is there in the parent and update that information here. So let's go ahead and make those changes on the components. I'm on my VS Code. So this is the child component talking to the parent. And there is also a LWC component that I've created which says parent listening to the child. So these are the two components that I'll be using. Since we have something already pre-built, I'll be making use of this components for my build. From the wireframe, what we know, we need to update our parent component to display one more message which says message. This is a message that I have from my wireframe or the PPT that I've shown you. I've just copied it from there and shown it here. Right. For an aesthetic perspective, let's add some break statements. And what I want the functionality of child executing a method that is there in the parent. And I'm just taking that example here. And once that happens, I want to print some information that is coming from the parent method. So I'll say message. I'm just creating a property here on the UI so that I can use it in the JS file for this parent listening to child component. So I'll say message after executing parent method. So this is my property. Again, my property is little big. So let's reduce it so that way I can easily access it. Right, I've made sure that the property that I've created is meaningful and also it is smaller to access it. Where I need to do, I need to go ahead and create this property in my JS file. I'll go ahead and create one property here. Initially, I'll be setting this value to blank. When I want this value to be populated, when a method that I have on the parent gets executed, handle parent method execution is what I'll name it. If you see here, I'm writing this component under my parent listening to child JS. Right, so that means I'm creating a method in my parent component. I'll say, so just to prove the point that it is getting executed, I'll add a console log. This method is executed from parent. And in addition to that, what I wanted to do, I want to set the variable that we have created on the UI. What is that? This is the variable. And what I want to set it with, I wanted to set it with a value saying that, yes, successfully executed the method is what I'll set. So that means initially it would be blank. If the parent method has been executed, this value would be updated with this message that I have in my parent method, handle parent method. So now comes the question, how do I execute this method? So I have the setup. So once this method has been executed, the property has been updated on the HTML as well, HTML template. So this value would be updated with that latest information. Now, how do I call this method that I have on the parent component? So that is where we need to understand the setup that we have already have in place, which is nothing but child communicating to your parent. How did we do that? If you remember, there are 3 steps that we have used. On the child, we are creating an event and dispatching that event. And what is the name of the event that we are using? Send message. So this is the syntax that we are using to initiate that event from our child to the parent. What is parent doing? Parent is listening to it. So once the event has been fired, we are writing a event listener by just like the syntax that we have used for on change, on click. Similarly, I have used on the name of the event that is coming from the child. In case if you are sending a custom event from your child, do not name this event as on something because it would be conflicting with the syntax that we are writing here. Make sure that you are naming that message without on in it. So the change, the listener that we are writing here is appended with on with the name of the custom event that is coming from your child. So this section is your name of your custom event, and we are appending on in front of it so that way we can write a listener to it. Right? So that is a best practice in terms of avoiding any further errors that you might come across if you do so. That is a best practice point of view. A tip that you need to keep in mind, do not write your custom event name with on in front of it. Now, coming back to our actual point, once the event has been fired, we have a handler class. Which handler method has been called? This handler method has been called. Where do I have it? I have this syntax here. If the child wants to execute this method, what I can do? I can simply put this in this event listener saying that this is the method that I want to call. Now you might be wondering, is it not that we are passing some message to the parent? Yes, we are doing so. In that process, what is happening? This method is being executed. This method is being executed. I'm leveraging that concept here to call the method that is there in the parent. Ideally, in case if you do not want to send any message, what you would do? You would go ahead with the first example that we've discussed, which is this. You would simply send an event, receive it on the parent, and execute the method that you want on the parent. In case if you want to send a message along with it, you would send that in the detail payload. In the handler method that you have, call the method that you want to execute in the parent. Now, if you ask me how exactly it is working, here is just like how we did in our previous exercise. I have a parent. Inside that parent, I have a child. Child wants to communicate or child wants to execute a method that is there in the parent. So let's say I have a method or parent method, P method in the parent component. From the child, I'm dispatching an event. What happens here? We have a setup that listens to this event that is coming from the child. So let's say that method is this. So once that is there, what I can do? I can listen to that event, execute this method. Once that method execution is done, if I do not want to call this P method, I can do nothing. In case if I want to do that, I'll just connect that method execution with this P method. So that is what I have done here. I've connected the execution of this P method in this method that is getting executed once there is an event that gets fired from the child. So this method gets executed, and once that is completed, I'm asking the system to execute this method so that way I can set this message. Right? The only extension that we did is this method that we have added, and we have told the system, since there is an event that is coming from the child, after executing the logic that is there in that method, go ahead and execute this method that I have. We have just changed those methods in terms of the execution. So this is how you would execute your parent method from your child method. Since there are few changes in both the components, let's deploy them. Deploy source to the org. I've deployed the parent component. Let's do the same thing on the child component as well. Child talking to the parent, deploy source to the org. Let's go back to our Salesforce org. What is expected? If I fire an event from the child, there should be a message, static message that I'll be writing. To that message, I'm setting a attribute that gets executed when an event has been listened by the parent. Let's go ahead and test that out. This is the component that we are focusing. So if you see here, two messages are there, two static messages. And this is my child component. This is the button that is there on the child component. Upon clicking on this method, method gets executed here. So let's test that out. I'll say hello SFDC request and click on this send message to the parent. So upon clicking on this one, two things would happen. One, this message here gets updated. Two, once that execution is done, it would invoke that parent method, and I can see that console logs as well, where it would be updating that message that we have set in place of this section. In that place, a new message gets updated. So let's look at the console logs. Before that, I'll clear off this console logs here. I'll go ahead and click this button to put everything into the frame. I'll just minimize this a little. So as soon as I click on this one, a couple of things are happening. First, send message to the parent button has been clicked, which is this one. Inside that, we are firing an event. That event has been listened at the parent level. So that is why you see parent listening to the child. That is printing event has been received. Inside the parent handle message from the child has been executed, and we are just printing the message that we are sending from the child component to the parent component. How can I say that it is a parent component? From the console logs, you can see the component here itself. And last but not least, we are executing a parent method here in the parent component once the event has been received. So it says this method has been executed from the parent. I am setting the value once the button is clicked. That message is also updated. Now, if you ask me, how do I call a parent method from the child? I'm using the concept of communicating information from the child to the parent. Once the parent listens to that event, we are asking that handler method to call that method that you want to execute on the parent component. So that brings us to the end of the section where we have seen how exactly we can call a parent method from our child. How we are doing it? We are taking the help of communication between the child to the parent concept to do that. And we have also implemented a requirement where we have understood how do we set a message once the event is been received from the parent component. In short, we are executing a method that is there on the parent once a child sends an event to the parent component.